Okay, here we are. We are live, people. We are live. Maybe I will get some music going just so that way I don't go insane. Man, I am very tired today. I may have had a few beverages with my brother last night. Bad idea. Not having the beverages, but the volume I had was too much. Um, yeah, way too much. But we live and we learn. Book Delta. Here we are. We actually get to actually look at metaphysics, which is cool. Book Delta concludes the preliminary sections of the metaphysics so that the investigation of being can commence immediately at the start of Book Epsilon. Okay, never mind. Of the previous books, Alpha and Alpha the Lesser has provided a historical survey of the metaphysics. Beta has set a range of problems to give the flavor of the difficulties that a comprehensive metaphysical position should be able to handle. Gamma has given an overview of the method and range of philosophy. Delta is intended to complete our preparation by equipping us with a kind of philosophical dictionary, providing the conceptual apparatus needed to follow the discussion of being and especially of substance. To some extent, the book succeeds in this. If it comprises definitions of some 30 terms, some of these terms are arguably more appropriate to physical science than to metaphysics. And there are other terms, such as those for account and definition, which might well have been included. It is also the case that the dictionary entry. So this is just a dictionary. Delta is just a dictionary. That the dictionary entries vary greatly in length for different items. The longest entries amount to philosophical essays on the concepts they cover, while the shortest are hardly more than notes. There is also considerable variation in the range of uses considered for different terms. In addition to this, it is not completely clear whether the dictionary is intended to indicate the usage of these terms in the contemporary language, or to prescribe new and specialized uses of them for the purpose of doing Aristotelian metaphysics. Nevertheless, the book does contain invaluable material for clarifying Aristotle's arguments, and any discussion of the use of major terms which are covered in it must begin by examining the discussion here. I do not provide introductions to the separate articles since their structure is apparent. You know, when I first started reading this, I actually didn't like this guy. I know it's text, but the guy who translated it and wrote the commentary is very much like, he doesn't like metaphysics. He actually thinks it's kind of dumb. So for that reason, I was like, this guy's dumb. But the more I read everything this guy's written, the more like I feel a connection with the guy. The more my parasocial relationship with the text at the start of a chapter builds up. And the more I'm like, dang, this guy, you know what? Maybe this guy's alright. Maybe he's okay. Anyway, let's begin with the dictionary that we're going to read today. Principle slash start. First definition. That in something from which a process might first arise. For instance, a line or road has a start at either end, though each in a contrary direction. That from which each thing might best be produced. For instance, even in the acquisition of understanding, it is sometimes right to make a start from the primary item, the principle proper of the object of the study, but from whatever point of entry is most conducive to progress. That from which, as an intrinsic part, something is primarily produced. Examples: the keel of a ship, the foundation of a house, Also, with animals, the heart, brain, or other parts are variously supposed to be of this kind. That from which, not as an intrinsic part, something is primarily produced, and that from which it is natural for a process to change or originate. Examples: a child coming from its mother and father, or a punch-up arising from a slanging match. What is a slanging match? I don't even know what slanging means. Abusive language.
Slanging.
So it's a slanging match is just an insult match. You're just insulting each other. That by whose choice processes and changes are initiated. For instance, political principles, also juntas, monarchies, and dictatorships are said to be princedoms. And one speaks of the principles of the arts, especially the architectonic ones.
Architectonic.
Is an adjective. Hold on, can I just do relating to the principles of architecture? That by which a thing is primarily cognizable. This too is called the principle of the thing, as demonstrations start with suppositions. For each account of principle/start, there is an account of cause, unsurprisingly, in that all causes are principles. A common feature then of all principles/starts is to be the primary origin of being production cognition, and some principles/starts are intrinsic, others external. So both a nature and an element are a principle, as also thinking and choice, substance and the final cause. There are many cases where the principle both of cognition and of process is the good or beautiful. Cause: an intrinsic feature from which something is produced. Examples: the bronze is the cause of the statue, the silver of the salver. Salver. Okay. Also, the kinds of such things are causes of them in this way. The form and template, which is the account of the what it was to be that thing, or in other words, which is the account of the essence. Also, the kinds of form are causes in this way. Examples: the proportion of 1 to 2 at a more general level. Number are the cause of the octave, also the intrinsic parts of the account. The source of the primary principle of change or stasis. For example, a man who deliberates is the cause of action. The father is the cause of the child. In general, the producer is the cause of the product, and the changer of the thing changing. Cause as end. The end of something is what that thing is for. For example, the end of taking a constitutional is to be healthy. Why, we might ask, is this chap walking about the place? It is in order, replies the expert, to be healthy. And in so saying, he reckons to have put his finger on the cause of the behavior. Causes in this way are also things which lie on the way to the end. When some other agent has initiated the process, for instance, to reach health, you may have to go through dieting, purgation, medication, or surgery, all of which are for the end of health, though they differ from one another in involving some cases, instruments, in other procedures. The above is a pretty comprehensive survey of the accounts of cause. And there are two consequences of the plurality of accounts of cause. First, there are many causes of the same thing, and this is not in an accidental way. For instance, the causes of the statue include both the art of the sculptor and the bronze, and they cause the statue, not qua something else, but qua statue. They do not, of course, cause it in the same way. The bronze is the material cause, and the art the source of the process. Secondly, reciprocal causation occurs. Exercise is the cause of fitness, but fitness is also the cause of exercise. Of course, the ways differ. Fitness is the end, exercise is the source of the process. You know, just from reading this, I do feel like the author may be right in saying that, like, you can't really be sure that this is Aristotle's writing, because it really does look like this is notes, this is commentary on the notes, and then this is commentary on the commentaries on everything else. Get what I mean? Like, it's quite disjointed. Another consequence is that the same thing is a cause of contraries. It very often happens that if something by its presence causes something, we take its absence to be the cause of the contrary. Since the skipper, by his presence, is the cause of survival, we take his absence to be the cause of the shipwreck. Both presence and privation, of course, are causes as a source of process. All the causes here, all the causes we have here mentioned are subsumed under only four conspicuous manners. Letters, for instance, are causes of syllables, material of artifacts, fire and earth, of such things of bodies, parts of the whole, and premises of the conclusion, all being causes as that from which, but some of them are cause as the substrate. Example, the parts as some as the essence, the whole composition and form. Sperm, meanwhile, the doctor, the deliberator, and more generally the doer, are all causes of change or stasis. The other causes are causes as the end and advantage of other things. Do they just like forget that space bars exist when writing this? Like, hello? There's no space in this whole thing. Oh, there's one there. That is so bad. Dang. For that, for the sake of which is prone to be the best, to be the end for other things, and for the present purpose. We can overlook the distinction between advantage and apparent advantage. This is, as we have said, a pretty fair and comprehensive summary of the species of cause. Now, there are, of course, a great many variations of cause, and yet, on summary, these two are not that many. There is, indeed, a plurality of accounts of cause, and even where causes are of the same kind, where is priority and posteriority among them. Thus, the causes of health comprise both doctor and expert. Those of the octave, both the proportion of 2 to 1 and number. Also, in all cases, the comprehending classifications of a cause are causes. Dang. Necessary, one. Being, substance, identity, difference. Contrary, formality, formerly other, prior, posterior, potentiality, quantity, relation, complete, limit. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Privation, to have, possess. to be form of something. Part, whole. This goes on forever. Maybe it's because I'm 150. So I need to get to page 150. And what page am I on now? Can I do it? I am very I'm not very hungover, but I am hungover. Potentiality. That's got to be like 30 pages. Um, I could probably do it, but it depends on how. I'm just gonna go until I don't feel like going anymore, I think, is what I'll do. Just because I'm lazy. Now, where was I? Here we are. Then again, there are accidental causes, and the comprehending classifications of these. For instance, in a way, it is the sculptor that is the cause of the statue, and in a way, Polycletus, in as much as it is an accidental feature of the sculpture that he is Polycletus. And so too, the comprehending classifications of man, for instance, is the cause of the statue and more generally animal, since Polycletus is a man and man is an animal. There is also greater and lesser proximity among accidental causes. For instance, white man and musical man could more remotely be said to be causes of the statue, and of all things to be causes either properly or accidentally. Some are said to be so as potential causes, some as actual. Either the builder or the builder building is the cause of building, and the same goes for the effects of causation. The effect might be this statue or a statue or an image, and this bronze, or more generally, matter. Ditto, accidental effects. Ditto. Primarily means the same, likewise, I agree with it. Right. That's the word of the day, ditto. Ditto the accidental effects. Also, both accidental and proper causes can be conjoined. Not either Polycletus or the sculptor, but Polycletus the sculptor. Yet even these variations only amount to 6 in number, albeit there are 2 accounts of each. They can be causes either as the particular, or as the kind, or as the accidental, or as the kind of the accidental, and in conjunction or simpliciter, and they can all be taken either as actualized or as potential. You can either have a potential cause or an actual cause. The difference between the latter is this: the actualized cause, especially the particular is not, at the same time as the effect. This particular healer is at the same time as this particular recipient of healing, and this particular builder is at the same time as this particular object of building. But this is not always so with potential causes. The house is not, for instance, necessarily destroyed at the same time as its builder. Right. Okay. I don't really get this last sentence, but we'll march on. The primary intrinsic component of something not being formally divisible into some other species of thing, the elements of speech, for instance, are components of speech and the products of its final analysis, not being themselves further divisible into other speech elements differing in species from themselves. Right, okay. Were they to be further divided, their parts would be, like parts of water and water, of the same species in contrast with parts of the syllable. Okay, so the element of an element is something that cannot be further divided down. That makes sense to me. And by the same token, the elements of bodies are said by their proponents to be the products of the final analysis of bodies, not themselves being further divisible into other elements differing in species. Whether such thing Whether such things be one or many, they are said to be elements. Similar to are the elements of geometrical proofs and of demonstrations in general. Primary demonstrations present in a large number of demonstrations are said to be the elements of demonstrations of this kind being primary syllogisms, with their three terms and their middle term. Taking the term element from this usage, some also apply it to anything which, being single and small, is used for many purposes, so that what is small and simple and indivisible is also said to be an element. And this is why the most universal things are elements, in that each of them, being single and simple, is present in many things, either in all instances or in the largest possible number. Yeah, like the like atoms or something. Atoms, I guess you could say, are elements that make up bigger things. But they are divisible further down, obviously. String theory. I don't know. And there have also been those who hold that unity and the point are principles. One thing I gotta say that kind of annoys me is when I was in school, all the teachers would tell me not to write "and" at the start of a sentence, but it seems to be pretty consistently like what people in books do all the time. Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of is silly to me. Also, since what are called the kinds are universal and indivisible, there being no account of them, they too are said by some to be elements. More so indeed that than the differentia, since the kind is more universal. For whenever the differentia pertains, so too does the kind, whereas the kind can pertain in some cases without the differentia doing so. The common feature of these uses is that the element of each thing is its primary intrinsic component. hmm That was short compared to cause. Nature is similar to essence, is what I'm guessing. The production of things growing. This aspect is suggested by the affinity between nature and native, the intrinsic component of something growing from which its growth primarily proceeds. The intrinsic source of the primary process for each growing thing, just qua the growing thing that it is. And a thing is said to grow if it undergoes increase from some external supply through contact. This either by assimilation or, in the case of the fetus, by natural addition. Assimilation is different from contact in that in the case of contact there is no need for anything else to be present over and above the contact, whereas in the case of assimilation there is something that is one and the same in both items, and this makes them assimilate rather than merely be in contact and be a unity in terms of continuity and quantity, though not in terms of quality. The primary material from which some of the things having natural being is either composed or produced, such stuff is pretty unstructured and insusceptible to change from its own potentiality. In this way, bronze is said to be the nature of a bronze statue, and of bronze utensils, wood of wooden ones. And so, and this also And this also applies to the other cases, for which anything made from such material, the primary matter, is conserved through production. It seems that the term nature and the term cause are pretty analogous. Doesn't seem like there's a very big difference between them. It is also in this way that people say that the elements of things having natural being are their nature. The suggestions range from fire, earth, air, and water to something else similar, some selection of them, or the whole lot. The substance of things with natural being. One view, for instance, is that nature is primary composition, or Empedocles has it that there is no thing with being has a nature, only the ceaseless mingling and discernment. Of what is mingled, nature is but a word of human framing. It's a heckin' social construct, man. Yeah, things don't exist. It's all a social construct. Anyway, that is also why, for things with natural being or production, when that from which they have natural being or production already exists, but they do not yet have their form/shape, we do not say that they have their nature. And something composed of both matter and form has natural being, such as the animals and their parts. Thus, primary material is nature, and in two ways, either relatively primary or primary simpliciter. Bronze is relatively primary for bronze artifacts. What is primary simpliciter might, for instance, be water, on the assumption that all smeltable things are water. I love how, like, with Greek philosophy, it's so smart, but sometimes you just get these weird things where, like, clearly science hasn't caught up. Because, yeah, anything that melts, anything that's smeltable, yeah, it's made out of water, actually. Yeah, yeah. So, iron, water. Bronze, water. Oh, wow, would you look at that glass? Yeah, glass is actually water. But so too is from and substance slash from is also the end of the production. All substance by extension. Now he's talking about substance. All substance by extension from above all cases, inasmuch as nature too is a sort of substance. The discussion should have established that primary nature, in the fundamental account, is the substance of those things with a principle of process within themselves qua themselves. Matter is then said to be nature by dint of its being receptive of the above, and it is because they are processes from it that productions and growth are said to be natural. And it is such nature that is the principle of process for things having natural being, in some way dwelling in such things either potentially or actually. Hmm. Interesting. Necessary. Necessary is one that I already know about because religious people have made arguments about God being necessary, which is, you know, kind of fun. Can't not exist, that sort of thing. Um, yeah, a casual contributor without which it is impossible. A causal casual. Oh my gosh. A causal contributor without which it is impossible for something to live. Examples: respiration. Oh, I can't read. I cannot read. Respiration and nutrition for an animal, which cannot have being without them. Preconditions of its being possible for good either to be or to be produced, for evil being removed or eliminated. Examples: taking medicine is necessary for not being ill, and a voyage to Aegina may be necessary to collect some money. The enforced and force, whatever in the face of drive and choice. conduces to impediment and preventation. For the enforced is said to be necessary, and hence Euenus reminds us also unpleasant. Everything needful is always a bore. And force too is a kind of necessary. C.P. Sophocles. Force is the sheer necessity that drives me. And necessity is thought, quite rightly, to be something in in like ineluctable, impossible to avoid. It is not, after all, contrary to the process associated with choice and calculation. When something does not admit of being otherwise, we say that it is necessary as it is. Indeed, it is from the use of necessary that all the other accounts of the necessary are derived in one way or another. For an action or affection is said to be necessary by enforcement, when the action cannot take place according to impulse because of some operative enforcement. And the rationale for this is that necessity is what makes it impossible for something to be other than it is. And the same goes for the preconditions of living and the good. For whatever it is impossible for, on one hand, the good, and on the other, living to have being in default of certain preconditions, those preconditions are necessary, and the cause here is a sort of necessity. Demonstration is also something necessary because demonstration cannot go otherwise than it does, assuming that it is demonstration simpliciter. And the cause of this lies with the primary premises, assuming it is impossible for what the argument proceeds from to be otherwise than they are. For some things, the cause of their being necessary is something other than themselves, whereas for others there is no such external cause, but rather they are themselves the necessary cause of other things being the case. So it is the simple that is the primary fundamentally necessarily. I'm starting to get a bit lost, to be honest. For this cannot be in a plurality of states, so that it cannot be in one state and another either. That would already involve a plurality of states. If then there are things that are eternal and immune to process, then there is nothing among them that is enforced or against nature. I think I get what it's saying, but for some things the cause their being is necessary. Yeah, it's basically talking about, this is just talking about contingent beings. So, for example, if you are a human and you have children, it is necessary that you have parents or a cause to exist, and you are the necessary cause for your children. So yeah, one is huge. I know this is probably cutting it a bit short again, but I am so tired. That's all we're going to get today. It's probably better than nothing. Better to have a little bit of reading than no reading, I suppose. But yeah, I'm too tired, and it's a bit too, much reading, too much absorption for one guy who's a bit hungover. So, unfortunately, I'm just going to have to leave it there. No one's watching, so it's no biggie. Yeah, too easy. I will see you all in the next one.